There were 3 forks in the sink. One from the salad I ate alone. One from the piece of cake I didn't want but forced down anyway. And one from her plate. The one she set out before leaving, like she was planning to be back. Like she was planning to eat. Her purse was still on the hook by the door. That's the first thing that made my chest tighten. Because Melanie never left without it. Not for work. Not for drinks. Not even for a walk to the mailbox. Her phone, yes. Her keys, sometimes. But never the purse. It's black leather, slightly worn at the edges, with a loose thread she always pulls it when she's nervous. That thread looked untouched. It's stupid, I know. A lot of things felt stupid that night. Like how I set the table for two. Like how I kept glancing at the driveway every time a car passed. Like how I pressed my ear to her pillow at 1 a.m., trying to figure out if it still smelled like her shampoo or something else entirely. She was supposed to be home hours ago. She said the team was going out to celebrate Lawson's birthday. It's casual, she told me, slipping into jeans she hadn't worn in months and a top I'd never seen before. Just the new guy and a few others. I'll be back by 10:11 at the latest. At 10:42 p.m., I sent a text. All good. No reply. At 12:03 a.m., I called. Straight to voicemail. By 1:30, I was walking in circles, rehearsing sentences I'd never said before. Maybe she got too drunk. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she forgot. Maybe. And then I opened the hallway closet. I wasn't looking for anything. I just opened it. Inside, her coat was still hanging. The long beige one with the inside pocket where she hides breath mints and receipts. The one she always wore when she planned on being out late. That was when I knew something was wrong. Not in a dramatic TV show way. No thunderclap or breaking glass. Just a quiet, hollow certainty that whispered, she didn't just forget to come home. She chose not to. I stayed up all night. Didn't sleep. Didn't sit. Just stood by the front window like some ghost in his own life. When the sun started to rise, I walked to the kitchen and noticed her fork in the sink again. Still there. Still clean. By 6:42 a.m., she hadn't texted. By 8:19, she still hadn't come home. And then at 9:11 a.m., the garage door opened. She walked in wearing different clothes. Not the jeans. Not the new top. Something softer. Wrinkled. Her hair was damp, but not like she'd showered. More like it had been washed hours ago and left to dry. She wasn't smiling. But she didn't look ashamed, either. I said nothing. She walked past me, grabbed the kettle, and asked, "Do we still have the peppermint tea?" That's how it started. Not with a scream. Not with a fight. Just a purse on the hook, a clean fork in the sink, and a peppermint tea request at 9:11 in the morning. You want to know what happened next? She didn't even flinch when I asked where she'd spent the night. She said, at Callista's, and stirred her tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her voice was steady, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Callista. A name I'd never heard until that moment. It felt dropped in like a placeholder. Like she expected me to accept it and move on. I didn't move on. Instead, I stood in the doorway, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, wondering how peppermint tea could smell so sharp when everything else in the room felt flat and airless. I asked why she hadn't texted. Why she'd gone dark. Why she let me wait up all night, thinking she might have crashed her car, been mugged, or, I don't know, simply gotten tired of coming home to me. She blinked slowly, then shrugged. My phone died. It always amazes me how 4 words can make a person feel like they've lost their grip on reality. Not because of what's said, but because of what isn't. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to scream, then why didn't you borrow someone's? Why didn't you care how I'd feel? But I didn't. I just stood there, letting her lie to me like I was some worn-out doormat she couldn't even be bothered to wipe her shoes on properly. Later that day, while she was working from home, in the bedroom with the door shut, I wandered into the laundry room. Not out of suspicion, not even on purpose. I was honestly just doing laundry. The basket smelled like her perfume. That floral, amber scent she only ever wore on special nights. And there it was. A crumpled piece of paper had slipped between her folded jeans and a pair of nylons. A receipt? No. A note. Handwritten. The handwriting wasn't hers. The lines were slanted and quick, like the writer had been rushing or nervous. It was scrawled on the back of a bar tab, folded in half, and had 2 short sentences. Last night was insane. Still thinking about that laugh. Stay beautiful. It wasn't signed. No name. No initials. Just that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room didn't spin. It just seemed a dull, like the edges of reality blurred out and left me inside a tunnel with nothing but that stupid note clutched in my hand. Still thinking about that laugh? Melanie barely laughed around me anymore. The kind of laugh that made her eyes close and her shoulders bounce used to be reserved for our movie nights, our road trips, our inside jokes. Lately, even when she did laugh, it was muted, like a courtesy, like a gesture. And someone else had gotten the real one. I put the note back. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't ready to confront it. Maybe because some twisted part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. If she'd lie again. If she'd slip. That night, I made dinner. I still don't know why. Grilled salmon. Her favorite. She said it smelled amazing. She took 2 bites, said she was tired, and went to bed by 9:15. I sat there with my untouched plate and read the note in my head 100 times. Last night was insane. Still thinking about that laugh. I couldn't sleep again. I just stared at the ceiling, counting every tiny creak, every passing car, every second of silence between us. It used to be a comfortable silence. Now it was suffocating. At 2:47 a.m., I walked into the living room and finally let myself cry. Not out of anger. Out of humiliation. Because I knew something was wrong. I'd known it for weeks. And yet there I was, still lighting candles, still grilling salmon, still setting her fork beside mine as if all of this could be undone by a well-cooked meal. I thought that was the lowest I could feel. The next morning, I sat in my car for nearly 30 minutes before starting it. I wasn't going anywhere in particular. I had the day off from the college, and the weather was gray enough to match my mood. But I needed to be out of that house, away from the smell of peppermint tea and the fake rhythm we were pretending to dance to. I pulled into the parking lot behind the town library. Not because I needed a book, but because it was quiet, safe, neutral. I sipped bitter gas station coffee and just sat there with the radio low, trying to make sense of what I was even supposed to do. I had a note written by a stranger, a lie about Callista, an invisible wall forming between us every day. And yet, I still couldn't bring myself to call it what it probably was. I scrolled through Melanie's Instagram. Nothing new. Her last post was from 2 weeks ago, some blurry group shot from a rooftop bar with a caption that read, "The grind is real, but so is this view." I noticed Lawson in the photo, just to the edge, wearing one of those smug half smiles that always seem to come with a trust fund. I clicked on his profile. Private. But his Spotify wasn't. And I swear to God, I didn't mean to snoop. I wasn't digging. I just noticed she was following his playlist. It popped up in her public activity feed. I clicked on it out of pure curiosity. It was called Midnight Escapes. You ever have one of those moments where your stomach drops but your brain doesn't catch up right away? The playlist started with a song we used to dance to in the kitchen when we were first married, Shadow Time by Susie and the Banshees. Not exactly something a 27-year-old guy like Lawson would typically know. Then came a string of deep cuts from bands Melanie loved in college. Obscure ones. Songs I'd forgotten even existed, but she still hummed in the shower sometimes. Songs I hadn't heard in our house in years. It wasn't just music. It was a memory trail. A curated breadcrumb path for someone who knew her well, or wanted to impress her enough to seem like he did. A weird sense of intrusion crawled over me, like I was watching someone flirt with my wife using pieces of our history. And maybe I wouldn't have thought twice about it if the final track hadn't been Let Me In by R.E.M. That song was sacred. It played during our first kiss. It was our wedding song. It was the song she said she wanted playing when she died. Not that I ever took that part seriously. Why would he have that in a playlist called Midnight Escapes? It was around that moment I realized something even worse than suspicion. Melanie was slipping away from me emotionally, but not in silence. She was telling someone else about the most important parts of our life. Our music. Our stories. Our ghosts. And this someone was packaging those pieces like a mixtape for a private movie I wasn't allowed to watch. I couldn't breathe. It felt like losing her twice, once when she walked through the door in different clothes, and again now, realizing she'd probably been walking out of our life one song at a time long before that night ever happened. I drove home with my heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear the engine. The house felt colder. She was in the backyard trimming the potted basil like she hadn't just erased the last decade of our marriage from her heart and handed it to someone else on vinyl. I asked her, without looking up from the hallway, "Do you still listen to our wedding song?" There was a pause. She replied, "What brought that up?" I shook my head. Just wondering. She didn't answer after that. Just kept clipping the basil. That night, I went into the guest room with my old headphones and played the playlist in full. Every song felt like a betrayal disguised as a melody. I sat there for hours with my eyes closed, trying to remember how it felt to matter to her. And somewhere between tracks 7 and 8, I realized something awful. It wasn't that I wasn't enough for her anymore. It was that someone else had become more. The following week felt like a surreal performance I hadn't auditioned for. We went through the motions, shared coffee in the morning, passed each other in the hallway, even sat on the couch together one night while some sitcom mumbled in the background. But nothing about it was real. Her laugh was mechanical. My smile hurt my cheeks. And every moment we touched, briefly, politely, it felt like our skin recoiled behind the scenes. I told myself I'd wait for something tangible before saying anything. Something undeniable. A photo. A message. A slip-up. I didn't want to base everything on a hunch or a playlist or a feeling, even if all of those were screaming the same thing. I wanted evidence, something to grip when my voice cracked, something that could puncture the carefully constructed silence between us. That something came on a Tuesday afternoon. She texted me from the office, asking if I could pick up dinner. Anything you like. I'll eat whatever. That used to be a loving offer. That day, it just sounded like she didn't care enough to choose. I stopped at a small Mediterranean place we used to love before things got complicated. I placed the order, waited in the car, and stared at the door like I expected answers to walk out with the food. The bag was heavier than I expected. I tossed it in the passenger seat and started driving. At the first red light, I glanced down and noticed something tucked into the bag, a printed receipt. Normally, I wouldn't care. I mean, who reads the receipt for hummus and falafel? But something about the way it was folded caught my attention. I opened it. The order had been placed online, under an account. Not mine. Not hers. The printed name on the top said, Lawson M. And the timestamp? Just 3 nights earlier. Same order. Same items. Same restaurant. It was a sinking, freezing, crushing kind of realization, the kind that wraps around your lungs like wet cement. Because that receipt told me something I hadn't even considered yet. Not only were they seeing each other, they were eating our food. At our place. While I sat home, probably washing forks and relighting candles like a fool. I didn't say anything that night. I brought the bag in, placed it on the counter, and sat across from her while she mindlessly scrolled through her phone between bites. I watched her chew. I watched her fake a smile when she said, "This is good, you know. We should get this more often." And I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I went to the bathroom instead, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and stared at the floor until my vision blurred. And then, for reasons I still can't explain, I pulled out my phone and typed into the browser. How to tell if your spouse is emotionally cheating. It was like Googling your own diagnosis when you already know the outcome. The signs? All of them applied. Increased privacy. Unexplained absences. Emotional detachment. Change in appearance. Secretive texting. I checked every box like it was some sick survey. And then I did something I still feel ashamed of. I opened her iPad. We share the same Apple account for music and photos, mostly out of laziness. It had been sitting untouched on the kitchen shelf for months. I cracked the code, her childhood dog's name, and pulled up her messages. At first, nothing. Then, tucked in a muted conversation labeled LM with a gray icon, I found the thread. It wasn't raunchy or explicit. It was worse. It was intimate. Lines like, "You made me feel seen again. I forgot what it's like to be desired. Everett doesn't look at me the way you do." I wanted to break the screen. I wanted to go out into the street and scream until my lungs gave out. Instead, I just stood there with that iPad in my trembling hands while her voice floated in from the living room, humming some stupid tune like nothing had cracked or crumbled. She didn't just betray me physically. She handed my ghost to someone else. And I knew, in that moment, I was nothing more than a placeholder in my own home. I remember the moment I stopped pretending. It wasn't dramatic. There wasn't a confrontation, no yelling, no slam doors. It was quiet, quiet in the way that only a truly broken thing can be. It happened on a Thursday night, while she stood at the kitchen sink washing her coffee mug and wearing a sweatshirt I had never seen before. It wasn't mine. It was oversized, with faded lettering across the chest, Davenport track and field. She didn't go to Davenport. She never ran track. I knew every hoodie she owned, and that one didn't belong. It hung on her like a memory she was trying to wrap herself in. When she caught me staring, she looked down at it like she'd just noticed. "Oh," she said, too casually. "It's just something someone left in the office. Super comfy." Something someone left? I swallowed hard and nodded like I believed her, but my chest was caving in. Because that sweatshirt wasn't just clothing, it was an anchor. A leftover trace of someone else that she felt safe enough to wear here, in our home, in front of me. That's not a mistake. That's a message you don't have the courage to say out loud. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed while she brushed her teeth. She walked into the room, still wearing the sweatshirt, and climbed under the covers without even glancing in my direction. I stared at her back, at the letters across her shoulder blades, and imagined him watching her wear it. Imagined him handing it to her after a night of shared laughter and whispered secrets. My stomach turned. I didn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., I went downstairs and opened the iPad again. The conversation with Lawson was still there. She hadn't deleted anything. She probably didn't think I'd ever look. I scrolled deeper this time, back several weeks, maybe longer. Each message was a pinprick in my chest. I wish I could wake up next to you without guilt. Sometimes I look at him and feel nothing. I don't think he even sees me anymore. And then there was a photo. Not graphic, but intimate. She was lying on a couch I didn't recognize, holding a glass of wine, wearing that same sweatshirt. Her smile wasn't posed. It was effortless. Relaxed. The kind of expression she used to give me years ago, before everything turned routine. The background showed a window I'd never seen, city lights glowing behind her. His apartment, I assumed. Or a hotel. Either way, it wasn't ours. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. Until every part of me wanted to scream. But instead, I saved it. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself that it was real. That I wasn't going crazy. That this wasn't just some emotional spiral conjured up by insecurity. She was disappearing into someone else's arms, and I had a still frame to prove it. The next morning, she made coffee like nothing happened. The sweatshirt was gone, replaced by one of her usual cardigans. She asked if I wanted toast. I said no. I couldn't even look at her without feeling like I was watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. That evening, I told her I was going to visit my brother for the weekend. I don't have a brother. I packed a small bag, grabbed my laptop, and drove to a cheap motel on the other side of town. The room smelled like bleach and old cigarettes, but I didn't care. I needed air. Space. Distance. I needed to hear myself think without her humming in the other room. I sat on the edge of that motel bed for hours, replaying every moment in my head. The missed texts. The phone dying. The mystery names. The late returns. The playlist. The note. The sweatshirt. Each piece was a puzzle I had ignored until now. But suddenly, it all locked into place. And when it did, I realized something truly sickening. She didn't forget to tell me. She didn't fail to see me. She was choosing this. Over me. Over us. And I wasn't ready for what I'd have to do next. I sat in that dim motel room for nearly 2 full days. Didn't turn on the TV. Barely ate. Just sat there on that stiff mattress with my laptop open and a blank document staring back at me. I tried to write down what I was feeling, something. Anything that might make sense of the hollow ache under my ribs. But every time I typed a sentence, I'd backspace it until it was gone. Nothing sounded real enough. Or maybe everything felt too real. On Saturday afternoon, I went home. The house was still. No noise. No movement. Just Copper curled up in his bed by the window, looking up at me like even he knew something was wrong. Melanie wasn't there. Her car was gone. I stood in the doorway longer than I needed to, almost expecting the walls to talk. They didn't. I walked into the kitchen. Her cup was on the counter, lipstick smudged on the rim. I opened the fridge and saw 2 unopened containers of takeout, both still warm. Like she had picked them up for 2 and changed her mind. Or never planned to eat them here in the first place. I went to her desk. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The drawers were tidy, too tidy, like she had scrubbed the place of anything emotional. But then I saw it, her calendar. Not the digital one. A physical planner. Melanie always liked writing things down. Appointments. Goals. Weekend trips. Except now, the weekends were blank. Every Monday to Friday was neatly filled with color-coded events, meetings, project deadlines, gym sessions, lunch with coworkers. But the weekends? Entire pages with nothing but a single phrase scribbled over and over in different pen strokes, sometimes in shorthand, sometimes as initials. LM. Sometimes with a heart. Sometimes with a quote. And then I saw it. The coming weekend had something circled in red ink. The only circle in the entire book. Charleston. No other details. No time. No reason. Just the name of the city. My heart sank. I sat down on the edge of her chair and stared at that word until it stopped looking like a place and started looking like a verdict. Charleston. A city we once said we'd visit for our anniversary, but never did. Now it was being resurrected, not for us, but for someone new. I didn't confront her. Not that night. I waited. She came home around 9:20 p.m. Said she stayed late finishing a proposal. Her hair was windblown. She wore that light denim jacket she only brought out for casual nights, the one with the inside pocket she always said was perfect for keeping lipstick and phone chargers. She kissed my cheek absently, not even looking at me, and walked past like I was part of the furniture. I watched her head upstairs. I followed her an hour later. She was asleep, or pretending to be. The light from her phone still glowed beneath the pillow. I didn't touch it. I just sat on the edge of the bed, facing away from her, and listened to her breathe like a stranger had invaded our room and laid her head on my wife's side of the mattress. The next day, I did something desperate. I followed her. I told her I had a department meeting. She smiled and said, "Hope it's not too boring." Then she left, just like that. Purse slung over her shoulder, denim jacket on, a little more makeup than usual. I waited 5 minutes. Then I got in my car and trailed hers. I felt sick the whole time. I kept thinking about what I'd do if she turned and caught me. What would I say? That I didn't trust her? That I suspected she was slipping away like sand through my fingers? She drove to the bookstore cafe downtown. Not her usual spot. She parked, went inside, and took a seat in the far corner. I stayed across the street, behind the tinted windows of my car, heart thudding against my ribs. 20 minutes later, he arrived. Lawson. He wasn't even trying to be discreet. Walked right in with that stupid smug energy and sat beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. She leaned into him like it was normal, like it was allowed, like I didn't exist. They ordered coffee. Laughed. He brushed something off her shoulder, something invisible, and she smiled in that way I hadn't seen in years. And that was the moment. That was when I realized this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't something that would go away on its own or fade with time. This was a new reality being rehearsed in plain view, and I wasn't in the cast. I didn't confront them. I drove home in silence. When she walked in that evening and kissed my forehead, I didn't flinch. But I knew. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. Sunday morning started like a lie dressed in routine. The air smelled like fresh coffee, eggs sizzled on the pan, and she danced around the kitchen humming a tune I didn't recognize. Maybe something he played for her. She wore a soft pink sweater I once told her made her look like a sunrise. That was back when I thought I'd get to see her glow every morning for the rest of my life. I sat at the table and nodded at the right moments. I even smiled when she handed me a plate, like I was still part of her world. But inside, I wasn't eating. I was documenting, memorizing. Every detail mattered. This was the last breakfast I'd pretend to have with her. The last day I'd play the role of Everett, her husband. By nightfall, that man would be gone. While she took a call on the back porch, I went upstairs and started packing. Not everything, just what mattered. My passport, my journal, a flash drive with every message she had exchanged with Lawson that I'd screenshotted from the iPad. And something else, a letter I'd written at 3 a.m. 2 nights before, sitting in the motel bathroom, shaking, sweating, and finally done. I didn't type it. I wrote it by hand. Every word. I wanted her to feel it in the loops of the letters and the pressure of the pen. I folded it into a plain envelope and slid it under her pillow. I didn't seal it. I didn't write her name on it. She'd know it was for her. Then I walked into the guest room, grabbed the duffel, and stared at the framed photo of our wedding that still sat above the dresser. She looked so happy in it. So did I. But now it felt like a souvenir from a country we both escaped in opposite directions. I didn't take it down. I just turned it face down. She came back inside a few minutes later, laughing at something on her phone. She didn't notice the bag near the door or the missing coat from the closet. She didn't notice me watching her from the stairway. She walked straight upstairs, still scrolling. And that's when I left. No explosion. No screaming match. No emotional breakdown. I just stepped outside into the cold, locked the door behind me, and started the engine. The envelope was the only goodbye she'd get. Inside it, the letter read, "Melanie, you left me a long time ago. You just forgot to tell me. I tried to believe your lies because the truth was too humiliating to face. I saw you leave for him in pieces, your laugh, your playlists, your weekends, your eyes when they stopped looking at me and started scanning for someone else's face. You didn't cheat with your body first. You did it with your silence. You made me question my own value while handing all your warmth to someone who hasn't earned a day of your history. I watched you become someone else's person while I was still trying to be yours. And I realized something painful. I don't want to beg to be loved in my own house. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. No dramatic exit. No attempt to make you feel guilty. Just space, finally. Enough space for me to start breathing again. You can tell Lawson whatever you like. Tell your friends a version that makes you feel better. I won't be here to correct it. Good luck in Charleston. I hope the hotel has your favorite soap. D. I turned off my phone at the gas station. Sat there for a long time, staring at the pump, wondering if she'd found the letter yet. Wondering if she'd even read it or just leave it folded, unopened like a receipt she didn't want to face. But I didn't turn back. I kept driving. I had no plan, no destination, just a tank full of gas and the kind of clarity that only comes after being emotionally gutted by someone you once made a life vow to. Around dusk, I pulled over at a rest stop and watched the sunset dip behind a line of pines. It looked like fire swallowing the horizon, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not victory, not relief, just quiet. I was finally alone with myself and the ghost of who I used to be. It's been 6 weeks since I drove away from the house we used to call ours. I never went back, never checked her social media, never answered her texts. I haven't even opened the voicemail she left 2 days after I left. I saw her name and let it rot in the inbox. There's nothing she could say that I haven't already screamed into a cold motel mirror. At first, it was hard. Everything reminded me of her. The little toothpaste she always used that I still kept in my bag. The smell of vanilla and cheap hotel lotion. The silence of nights when there's no one brushing their teeth in the other room or turning down the bed. I cried more in those first 10 days than I have in the last 10 years combined. I stopped recognizing myself in the reflection. I looked like someone who had been left behind on accident, like forgotten luggage. But grief, it turns out, is a good fertilizer. It hurts like hell, but if you sit with it long enough, it starts pushing new things through the cracks. I found an apartment in a quieter town, 2 hours north. It's nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, creaky floors, a small balcony where I sometimes sit with a blanket and a cup of coffee that I make exactly the way I like it. I started going for walks. At first just to fill time, then because I needed to. I got a library card again. Started reading poetry. I even picked up my violin for the first time in a year. The strings were stiff. The bow needed re-rosining. But the music was still there, waiting under the dust. I've also been going to group meetings. No, not therapy, not officially. Just a little community circle at the church down the block. People who've had the floor fall out from under them, just like I did. We sit in folding chairs and talk about the things we didn't expect to survive, but did anyway. Some of them laugh now. I haven't yet, but I smile. And sometimes that feels bigger than laughter. The other day, I passed by a couple in the park. She was laughing so hard she nearly dropped her ice cream, and he caught it before it hit the ground. She threw her arms around him like he'd just saved her from a burning building. It hit me in the chest for a moment, not because I missed her, but because I missed that. The purity, the honesty, the small moments that didn't feel calculated. And instead of sadness, I felt hope. Because I knew I still believed in love, I just stopped believing in the version I had with Melanie. And maybe that's the point. Maybe losing her wasn't the collapse of everything. Maybe it was the opening. She made her choice. I made mine. I don't hate her. I don't need revenge. I don't need her to suffer or apologize or crawl back with tear-streaked cheeks. I don't even want closure anymore. I just want to keep walking toward whatever version of myself is waiting on the other side of this pain. Some days are still hard, but most aren't. Most are just quiet. And lately, I've found that quiet doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like peace. If you're reading this and you're where I was, holding your breath, doubting your worth, waiting for someone to love you the way you deserve, I just want you to know, it gets better. You get better. Because I did. And somewhere out there, she's still spinning stories about why I left. But I'm here, living one she'll never be part of. And that's the happiest ending I could ask for.